Hello, we're here for another version of Digital Voice. My name is Evan Lane. I'm the Director of Law and Society, and we have with us two students. Caroline, introduce yourself.
My name is Caroline Allen, and I am a student studying Law and Society.
Kevin?
My name is Kevin Templin. I'm a business management major studying here at Philadelphia University.
And you're both in my crime and justice class, correct? Okay.
Yes.
Yesterday we had an interesting discussion, which I want to recreate best we can, concerning Steubenville, Ohio. For those who don't know about this, two football players were convicted of raping a girl at a party. The facts were that she had come to this end of the year party. She was a minor, everyone else were minors, to an adult's house where there was vodka and beer served. She drank so much that she basically was passed out standing up. During that time, in one of the houses, according to videos and tweets that are on the internet, she was violated in many ways. Some of the videos talk about that she was peed on, others that guys took out their penises, put it on her body. Obviously, she was not consenting to any of this as she was passed out. She was then taken out of that party by the defendants, the two people ultimately charged, taken into a car where she was digitally raped using their hands. She woke up the next morning in another house, not having any idea where she was. She found out from digital media exactly what had happened to her. So what I want to discuss first, and we'll start with Caroline, go to Kevin, what responsibility, if any, does this young lady have for what happened to her in light of the fact that she got extremely drunk?
This young lady is a victim, and the word victim means that you don't put the blame at all on the victim. And putting the blame on a victim would mean that she is taking up some of the responsibility. I do not believe that drinking alcohol, going to a party, allows for anyone to do anything to her that she doesn't consent to. She's a victim.
Kevin, any responsibility on her behalf?
In terms of the actual rape, I don't think there was any responsibility, but I know we talked about this in class, a little more background. She actually didn't know anybody at that party, so it was somewhat her responsibility getting that drunk, because normally students or people will go out, and if you get that intoxicated, you are with friends, and she decided to go to a party where she knew no one and get completely beyond the point of coherence. Yeah. And so to that point, I mean, I guess you can say it was her responsibility getting that drunk, but that doesn't mean every time somebody gets drunk that they should be violated like this. So in terms of the actual rape, I don't think any responsibility goes on her.
Caroline, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I definitely want to respond. Just to draw a comparison, I think a lot of people, not necessarily pigeonholing you into this, that people will compare, you shouldn't go into Camden, New Jersey and not expect to get shot or have your car stolen. But those kind of comparisons are ludicrous, because something in this case where she's a victim, you can try to play out the sequence and have her change something. That ripple effect will keep her from getting raped. But the fact of the matter is, regardless of the sequence of events, all you need to do is to focus on the event in which she got raped. And in no way will that ever be justified, regardless of anything in the past. No excuse.
I want to switch a little bit, and I'll start with Kevin on this. The media coverage on this. We all saw in class that CNN reporter, she said that these boys, their lives will be ruined and they'll never be football players. And then she went on to say it was the most emotional thing she's ever seen in a courtroom. And we saw pictures of one of the defendants being hugged by one of the court personnel as he broke down crying. And finally, they mentioned a little story about how that same defendant was told for the first time and how emotional it was that his father loves him. And that may be why he's gone astray. What was your reaction to seeing that type of coverage?
Well, first, with that particular individual, he is the only one that really seemed remorseful. The other one just kind of stood up and was like, sorry. So I guess to some extent I can see why someone might portray him a little more as being the one that's actually apologetic for what happened, because I'm sure he was also drunk, not that that justifies it. But in terms of the media coverage, though, you have to have – the victim chose not to come out and say her name, which is completely understandable. But as a business major, I realized that CNN is a business and they need ratings to be a successful business. And you need to have, and especially in a case like this, you need to have somebody portrayed in a light that the public is going to feel a little sympathetic for. So when you don't have a victim, you have to go to the next best thing and kind of portray maybe one of the perpetrators as a little more remorseful than the other one. But it might have went a little far, especially with the court official hugging him. I think he had no part doing that. He definitely, being a court official, you need to be able to stay objective to the whole outcome of the case, not go hug a kid because he's crying. Of course he's going to be crying. He's going to jail for a year. I mean, it's not something he should have been doing.
Carolyn?
In terms of CNN's media coverage, we'll never know their true intentions, but I have to say the consequence of this has been unbelievable. And I think society is very divided on date rape. And I think most of society does, really side with the men and always say, either the girl shouldn't have gotten that drunk or the girl just cries wolf and says, she's getting raped. And I think by CNN covering sympathy for these men, I almost think it was a great thing, because then society finally has to think about it and they look at it and go, wait a second, this is not provoking the right emotions out of me. And it really causes them to think about the actual situation, which maybe wasn't CNN's intentions, but I would definitely say, as far as society is right now in Philadelphia University, CNN is very well discussed, whereas I think if someone didn't do that, this issue wouldn't be discussed
So
as
it
much.
opened up a discussion,
Yes.
even if they didn't intend to. The good result is that we're talking about. Let me turn it to, because you've gone that way, and I'll start with something I thought was very dividing in our class. The hypothetical I gave is, if it's a hookup at a party or a bar, someone you basically don't know, and you go to a private area and the female says no. At that point, does anything that happened thereafter, is that rape? So I'll start with the male member of our panel, Kevin. What are your thoughts?
Well, this was definitely the most heated argument that we had in class. I think once that no is spoken, then most guys should back off. I mean, it's not something you should pursue, especially once no is spoken. I mean, that's kind of like my definition of rape. A girl says no and you keep going. It was more the discussion when it turned to, can anyone give consent while being drunk, that was more what kind of agitated me a little, because it kind of seemed, I don't know about Carolyn, but it kind of seemed like the girls thought that if you're intoxicated, you can't give consent whatsoever, in which case any intoxicated girl having sex with a man, whether she wants to or not, you would consider that rape because you can't give consent. So that's something I really disagreed with. I know friends who get intoxicated and then they actually want to have sex with their significant other or just random people. So it's definitely not something that I think alcohol, if you're passed out drunk, that's one thing. If you had a few and you're tipsy, that's not rape. So
Let me push you just a little on this. In a situation, say the girl says no, then the guy says, "Oh, come on," or "Why are you such a tease?" Something along those lines. And then after that, the girl says yes. Is that rape?
that's walking a line, but I don't think it is. Only because if she actually recants and then says yes and like goes into the act of having sex, then I would say that's not rape. But if she just says no and then he just keeps like kissing on her and like rubbing up on her and then she eventually just like lays there, and then I could see maybe, but definitely not if she comes back and says, all right, yes, just because, even if she feels guilty, like that's not something you have to say yes to because you feel guilty. So I don't think that that should be an excuse for a girl who says yes after she says no. I think if you don't want to have sex with someone, stick to no. Don't
Play games.
Don't bullshit around and play games and then come back and say yes. And then the next day say, because you're embarrassed or because you thought he guilted you into it, go back and say, oh, he raped me. I don't think that's right.
Carolyn?
Okay. First, I'd like to start with a story. I had a friend who was on online dating, and she was talking to a guy. I would say for about 3 months, they went on a date, and he invited her back to her place to watch a movie, which we all know is a euphemism for like making out and fooling around. She walked into the apartment, and as soon as she walked in, he was a hoarder. The apartment was disgusting, and she wanted to leave at that point. And that part that you mentioned about like guilt and pressure, sometimes it's just the atmosphere and like it's external things that you can't control. That was the first thing. And then he brought her into the bedroom, which by the way was spotless. And then she knew something was wrong. And at that point, there was like nothing she could do. She was terrified. And ended up, she said in the beginning, I do not want to sleep with you. There's no alcohol involved. He never forced her, not once. Didn't threaten her or anything. And when they were having sex, he just kept saying to her, you know, you're my girlfriend, this and that. If you hurt me, I'm going to make sure that you can't get into any bars ever, this and that. And this was a man that she was friends with. I mean, that they've been talking for like months. And the next day, she felt so dirty and so used. And she never wanted to use the word rape, but that was rape. So I guess my point in telling that story is that when you're pressured, that's rape. And when you'd mentioned something, I think it was Lane who said something about like, oh, come on, you're such a tease. I don't think men understand how difficult that is to say no. You have to understand that throughout your entire life, you're the dominant person and that we're conditioned to be submissive. And when we're not submissive, we get a lot of negative consequences from that outside the bedroom. So we're conditioned to that. So, you know, if a girl is making out with a guy, he's going up her shirt, like feeling up her butt, and she goes to him, you know, I don't want to have sex. You know what clicks in his head? I'm alpha male. I'm dominant. I'm not going to force you, but I'm going to challenge you. And, you know, that's where a lot of rape comes in.
Kevin.
I'm trying to think of how to respond. It's a difficult situation just because I'm actually not one of those people. So I guess it's hard for me to put myself in someone's shoes who's going to try and guilt someone into having sex. Girls are not the only ones that can fall victim to this kind of stuff. I mean, I know plenty of girls that get intoxicated and then they get really frisky towards guys and will not take no for an answer. And I know people will be like, oh, well, you're a guy. You're okay with just having sex just to like shut her up. And that's not necessarily how it is. I mean, maybe you're talking to somebody else. You don't want to get put in that situation. So I think we put too much emphasis on the alpha male thing only because of how society is evolving now, because I don't think that we're brought up in terms of that whole alpha male thing anymore in terms of how I was raised. I don't know anybody else's case, but I mean, my parents, they're equals in the marriage. They both make about the same kind of money. They both control the money. Like my dad doesn't just control one thing and my mom just sits there and is submissive. I mean, she does have what I guess you would consider those traditional womanly qualities. Like she usually cooks, but I think that's just something that she enjoys doing and something she grew up around because her parents were definitely like that. But I don't really know. Getting back to what you said, I mean,
I think as we're running out of time, I think the best thing to say, believe it or not, 15 minutes has gone by already. I think the thing to say is that this situation is incredibly complicated because when the woman comes into the bedroom, the man comes into the bedroom, you're coming in with all these preconceptions on what sex is, what consent is, and all these issues which make the casual hookup a lot more complicated than we could even have dreamed. And I think Caroline said in class, maybe the solution is communication is probably the only way between the sexes on what we're thinking. Anyway, I want to thank you, and I want to thank the radiator for making noise.